Well, hello everyone out there, and welcome to this very special NativeScript event today. Over the next hour or so, we're going to be covering anything and everything having to do with NativeScript 6.0. Now, this new version of NativeScript comes with all sorts of new features, new enhancements, and yes, some breaking changes. So we are here to hold your collective hands to make sure your transition to 6.0 is as enjoyable as it can possibly be. Now, for a brief look back in time, NativeScript 4.0 came out a little more than a year ago, and that release was laser focused on performance. We wanted to make sure your app's startup time and overall user experience reflected the native nature of NativeScript. Then NativeScript 5.0 was released towards the end of 2018, bringing with it the first set of many improvements to the developer experience. And this is where we saw the first iteration of features like Hot Module Replacement, or HMR, which we'll be diving into today. So what theme encompasses 6.0? Well, we asked ourselves what the most pressing concerns are and will be in the mobile development community. And this really led us to not one, but kind of three key themes of 6.0. The first is a continued focus on that developer experience. Now, I'm not going to give anything away, but improved HMR is here, and I think you'll be pleased by this little thing we call NativeScript App Sync. We're also focusing on providing you the tools to make your apps look better. We have a vastly improved core theme with iOS dark mode support. We have material design components coming soon, and plenty more to go over with you. And finally, we're keeping a close eye on the future and gazing into our little crystal ball. NativeScript was never meant to just be used for iOS and Android, and today you'll get a little taste of what I mean by that. Now, before we really get going today, I do have some logistical issues to quickly cover. If you encounter any problems today, if my hair starts on fire or anything like that, or if you have problems with your audio or video, rest assured we will have a full recording of this webinar available on YouTube in the coming days. You'll be able to find it on the NativeScript YouTube channel at bit.ly/YouTube-ns, and we will also send you a follow-up email with the link included. Now, if you get your tech news on Twitter, be sure to follow us at NativeScript. Twitter is arguably the best place to go for NativeScript news these days. And I mention this because today, during this webinar, we will also be monitoring the Ask NativeScript hashtag on Twitter. So add this hashtag to any questions at all that you have on Twitter today. All of us here on the NativeScript Developer Relations team will be there, along with folks from our core engineering team. I also highly recommend you subscribe to NativeScript News. We send out some really great info in this email newsletter, usually about every month or so. No spam, I promise, just a monthly digest of some of the latest NativeScript happenings. You can find back issues and a subscription form at nativescript.org/news. And when you start with NativeScript, you will inevitably need some help along the way. One powerful resource is Slack. We have nearly 12,000 people on Slack today, so get your free invite at nativescript.org/Slack. All right, enough logistics. As a quick introduction, my name is Rob Lauer, and I manage the Progress Mobility Developer Relations team. Product-wise, my team is focused on the free and open source NativeScript framework that we're talking about today. We also spend a fair amount of time working with Progress's commercial products that leverage NativeScript, like the Progress Kinvey platform. Now, I'll be your host today as we shift between our speakers, and you can find me on Twitter at Rob Lauer. And we often get a lot of new NativeScript developers or folks who are just curious about NativeScript at these webinars. Hello to all of you. If you're new, it might be helpful for you to know that NativeScript is a completely free and completely open source framework used to create truly native mobile apps for both iOS and Android from a single shared code base. Now, it's not Cordova, it's not PhoneGap, it's way more like React Native, but for Angular or Vue instead of React. So you do use your web skills, like JavaScript or TypeScript, CSS, and an HTML-like markup language to create your native app UI. And again, you also have the option of using two of the most popular JavaScript frameworks available today, Angular or Vue.js, or no framework at all. NativeScript does not depend on any individual framework. It's quite extensible that way. In fact, speaking of the extensibility, one of our fantastic community members, Jamie Birch, has been feverishly working on integrating React with NativeScript. Now, this may well bring the most popular JavaScript framework available today to NativeScript and provide some of those missing features that React Native developers have been looking for. You can find the pre-release of React NativeScript at this URL, Feel free to poke around, but just know that it is very much in its infancy still. So when it comes to creating these native mobile apps with Angular, with Vue, or yes, maybe someday soon with React, NativeScript shines in some really key differentiating areas. The first is performance. NativeScript apps are truly native. When you add a button element to your app, the NativeScript framework automatically transforms that into a native UI button on iOS and an Android.widget.button on Android, all without you having to write a single line of Swift, Objective-C, or Java. Apps written with NativeScript, yes, use JavaScript. Apps are styled with CSS, and it's the same CSS you've been using for years, and the markup is a friendly XML-based syntax. And NativeScript does give you access to the entire libraries of both iOS and Android device APIs without relying on plugins. And you can also share code between existing web apps and your mobile NativeScript apps if you're using Angular or Vue. Now, if you're not necessarily an early adopter, you should know that NativeScript, in fact, has been around for a while, since 2015, in fact. And while, of course, this chart is not really to scale, our usage of NativeScript around the world has really grown significantly over the past couple of years. We're up about 2,000% in month-over-month downloads from August of 2016 to June of 2019. Now, this equates to nearly 6 million total downloads, and along with about 17,000 stars on GitHub, so pretty good. Now, the reason NativeScript exists at all today is because of Progress. Progress is our parent company and the company that fully supports the open source NativeScript framework. Progress is also the company behind Kendo UI and the serverless platform Kinvey. In fact, beyond just supporting the open source flavor of NativeScript, Progress actually uses NativeScript within the Kinvey platform. Specifically, NativeScript and Kendo UI are key components of Kinvey Studio. Kinvey Studio provides a visual drag and drop web and mobile app development interface for developers to really rapidly create app experiences. You can check out Kinvey Studio for yourself at studio.kinvey.com. Now, if you're looking to add a chatbot to your mobile or web app, you can also check out Kinvey Chat. This lets you create engaging transactional chatbots. And finally, Kinvey Micro Apps uses NativeScript to let developers build and deploy tiny micro app applications via one single container app. So some really cool tech in here to check out, and needless to say, NativeScript is a key component in Progress's mobility strategy going forward. In fact, Kinvey was just named a leader in Gartner's Magic Quadrant for multi-experience app development platforms. So you can read more about that at nativescript.org. Now, if you're just getting started with NativeScript, a great way to check us out is the NativeScript Playground. The Playground is a completely web-based environment that lets you walk through a variety of tutorials, do some coding, and deploy an app to your phone. But we all know web-based environments can really only take you so far, which is why, of course, we offer the NativeScript command line interface as well. And you can find all sorts of great getting started resources at docs.nativescript.org. Now, I did want to mention, though, traditionally when developing mobile apps locally with your CLI and local tools, I don't care what framework you're using, there are a series of hoops for you to jump through. Whether it's installing SDKs to configuring emulators or settings on your device, this one-time setup process can be a bit of a turnoff. However, on the NativeScript team, we've made the local development process much easier by removing some of these steps. How? Well, the command is TNS Preview, part of the NativeScript CLI, and it's another way we help you to get started with NativeScript by using your local environment and local tooling without having to install those big SDKs until you're ready. So if you haven't played around with TNS Preview yet, it's definitely worth trying out. Finally, if you're looking for some app inspiration, I always like to send people to market.nativescript.org. Not only will you find loads of NativeScript plugins, but you'll also find a series of sample apps that you can make copies of and download from the NativeScript Playground. All right, so let me get to introducing our speakers today. Coming up, we have our newest NativeScript developer advocate, Stanimira Valeva. Mira comes to us directly from the NativeScript engineering team, so she is a fantastic resource to have on board. We also have TJ Van Tol, who's our principal developer advocate here at Progress. Find him on Twitter at TJ Van Tol. And we have Sebastian Vitalitz. He is our senior developer advocate. You can find him on the Twitterverse at Sebavita. All right, so remember to use that Ask NativeScript hashtag on Twitter for any questions during the webinar. And with that, Mira, I'd like to hand the stage over to you.
Hi, my name is Stanimir Voeva, and I'm a developer advocate at Progress. I will talk about some of the changes in the NativeScript 6.0 release, and also how to migrate your existing applications and plugins so that they are compatible with these changes. I will start with one of my favorite topics, the module bundler Webpack. Its job is to take your existing source code and bundle it into a few output files. It doesn't sound like a very big deal, does it? However, Webpack is widely used in the JavaScript landscape nowadays. Webpack is an integral part of the build systems of Vue.js, Angular, and of course NativeScript. Actually, the NativeScript CLI supports two different workflows for building your application. The legacy workflow, which copies everything from the source folder to the native application, and the bundle workflow, which uses Webpack to bundle the source code. You can enable the bundle workflow by providing the bundle flag. The bundle workflow is the newer approach, but what are its benefits compared to the legacy workflow? When we run a project through Webpack, we get a few output files, which means we need fewer file system requests on startup. And let me tell you that, doing a couple of FS requests can be significantly faster compared to doing 10,000 FS requests, especially on older devices. Webpack has also plugins that can minify our code, which means smaller output bundle. Loading smaller files leads to faster startup time. In NativeScript, the minification can be enabled by providing the env uglify flag. The NativeScript Snapshot plugin for Webpack allows us to execute some JavaScript code while we are building our project and take a snapshot of the memory heap. When we start the application, the snapshot is loaded and the execution of the same JavaScript code is skipped. Again, the result is faster startup time. Loading custom heap snapshots is a feature of the JavaScript engine V8, which is used in the NativeScript Android runtime. We use a different engine for iOS, and this is why the snapshots feature is actually only available on Android. You can enable it by using the env snapshot flag and only when building for release. Although this can change in some of the coming releases, so you might be able to use snapshots for development very soon. The last performance benefit that I'm going to mention is actually Angular specific. With the env AOT flag, you can instruct the Angular compiler to run ahead of time while you're building your application. And if the Angular compiler does its job during build, we don't really need it at runtime, right? This means that we can remove it from the build application and decrease the bundle size with almost 1 megabyte. And Webpack takes care of removing it for us because it knows it's not gonna be used. Again, this also results in faster startup time. But how much faster is a bundled application? Groceries is the app that we all had to build while completing the NativeScript Getting Started tutorial, and this is why I'm gonna use it in this example. When we build it with Webpack, the startup time of the groceries application for Android improves with 63%, while the startup time for iOS improves with a tremendous 67%. With all that said, I'm happy to share that the NativeScript 6.0 release is Webpack only. The legacy workflow is no longer part of the CLI and you cannot use it. Also, you don't need the bundle flag to enable the bundle workflow because it is the only one. All CLI commands that build the application code now use the bundle workflow. TNS build, run, preview, prepare, debug, and test all use Webpack underneath. If you provide the bundle flag by some mistake, that won't change the behavior of the command, but this flag is deprecated, so make sure not to use it. And what about HMR, or hot module replacement? If you have forgotten about it, I will refresh your memory with a short video. We have two identical projects running on two different emulators. The application on the left is built with a legacy workflow, while the application on the right is built with the bundle workflow and hot module replacement. We make the same change in both projects and save them at the same time. The HMR application reloads for less than 2 seconds. The legacy application restarts, loses its state, and we see the change that we made for more than 10 seconds. You can clearly see the benefits of HMR. If you want to learn more about it, check out the HMR deep dive blog posts. And you can expect more content about this feature. This is mostly because NativeScript 6.0 is HMR first. This means that all commands related to live sync, TNS run, preview, and debug now use hot module replacement by default. If you want to disable it, you can provide the no HMR flag when executing one of the mentioned commands. However, if you're facing any problems developing with hot module replacement, please reach out and log them as issues in GitHub or just ping someone in the community Slack. Another update to the NativeScript CLI API is the fact that the sync all files flag has been removed. This flag used to start the watcher for the node modules directory. However, this is no longer needed in the bundle workflow because Webpack watches all files that have been required in the source code regardless of their location. Additionally, the NativeScript CLI starts its own watcher for the native files. And the final bit about the bundle workflow is a small update about the NativeScript Dev Webpack plugin. This is a package containing all build logic related to Webpack. I'm really excited to share that the NativeScript Dev Webpack plugin now has its first stable release, version 1.0. The NativeScript Dev Webpack package plugs into a NativeScript CLI build using the hooks API. Let's take a look at the build command. It has two main phases: prepare, which creates a structure for the native project, the platforms folder, and build, which takes care of building the project itself. The NativeScript Dev Webpack package plugs into the process with an after prepare hook. This hook is basically a chunk of JavaScript code which is being executed by the NativeScript CLI. As you may guess it, this hook uses Webpack to bundle the application code and output it in the outread project. Later on, the NativeScript CLI just builds the project. Migrating the CLI to the bundle workflow required some changes to the hooks API. Some of them may be breaking for NativeScript plugins, and for more information, please check out the blog post on migrating CLI hooks to NativeScript 6. The next big change in NativeScript 6 is the support for Android X. Android X was announced last year at Google I/O as a replacement of the existing Android support library. All widgets and functionalities from the support library exist also in Android X. However, any new development will happen only in Android X now. This is why with NativeScript 6 we decided to migrate over to Android X, and this means that you cannot use the support library anymore. Let's see what this means for your existing code. Android X provides a consistent namespace of the same name. For example, the first line of code here uses the support library namespace, while the second line of code uses the Android X namespace. If you have any namespace of the first type, you must migrate them over to Android X namespaces. Also make sure to update your native dependencies. All plugins maintained by the NativeScript team have been updated to Android X, together with the most widely used plugins from the NativeScript marketplace. If you're using a NativeScript plugin that hasn't been updated to Android X, please log an issue in its GitHub repository, of course if it is open source, and point the owner to this migration blog post.
Thanks Mira, this was great. Hello everyone, my name is Sebastian Vitalec. I am a senior developer advocate at Progress. You can follow me on Twitter at SebaWita. So there are a few things that I want to talk to you about. The first one is font icons everywhere. So you probably already used Font Awesome or other font icons inside your NativeScript project. However, there were some components like the action bar or tab bars or an image component where you couldn't use font icons well. The good news is this has changed and now you can use font icons pretty much everywhere. And in case you're new to font icons, I'll give you a very quick crash course. So you could download, for example, Font Awesome from their website. And then in your project, you have to add the fonts folder, drop the .ttf file, and then in your style sheet, like app.css, you just have to create a class. So I call this one .fa, and then set the font family where you're pointing to which of the fonts that you want to use from the fonts folder. And that's pretty much it. So I just want to show you a couple of examples of how with the new component. So if you're using action bar and you want to use a font icon, then on action item there's a new property called icon, which you can set and you just use this syntax. We say font : / and then you provide the code for the specific icon, and then you provide a class, like in my case is fa, and that's pretty much it. If you're using an image component, then on the source property, so it's actually the alt property, using the same syntax, font : / code for the icon, class fa, and then this will actually render the font icon inside your image component. And then when you're using bottoms navigation or tabs navigation, on the tab strip item, there's a new property called icon source. So on icon source, again, using the same syntax, you can set font : / and provide the code for the icon. And if you use, for example, a tabs component, again, inside tab strip items, you can set the icon source. And of course, if you could still use it the old way, so you could, for example, instead of using icon source, you could say title, but in this case, you don't have to say font : / you just provide the code for the icon that you want to use, and then maybe some text about after this. And this is actually how you can provide both an icon and a text right next to each other if you want to be a little bit more descriptive. So I'd like to jump into a quick demo and show you how those icons work. So I have here my project, and you can see my app.css has this .fa class where I'm specifying the font family, and I have just a couple of components that I want to show off. So the first one is my action bar. When using the font awesome, I am displaying like a shopping cart and like a folder icon, which is this one, and with a series of images, I am basically telling my daily story that if I pick up my phone and I see that it's on low battery, then I'm kind of not in a great mood, and then I can start charging it. So, and I'm going through these different phases as the battery charges more and more and more. And then when I see that it's almost over, you can see me smiling, and I'm happy that my phone is ready to use again, so I can, go for a run or something. And the next example I'll show you is using a different tabs component. And don't get too scared of this code, because I'm actually nesting one tab view inside another. So I'm going to just navigate here, and you can see with my bottom navigation first. In my tab strip, I'm actually setting the icon source to two different icons. So this is like the home icon, and this is the gear for settings. So these are the two icons over here, but also in the first of the tabs, I am using this tabs component, and in this case with the tab strip item, I am setting a title just to show you that I can actually use home and settings, so I can have an icon and a bit of text right next to it. So actually that is actually pretty cool, and these are the three new components that you can now use with font icons that you weren't able to do so before. The next thing on my list is the new NativeScript theme core 2.0, which currently is in the beta stage, and we hope to be ready with it completely by the release of NativeScript 6.1. And it's really nice. It's actually rebuilt from scratch, and you have a lot more options to choose from, and you can choose between like a light and dark theme, and you can choose different skins on top of that. It's actually really nice and really amazing. So what's different in the theme 2.0, aka the breaking changes? Well, one of the first thing is that we are using element selectors to set up the themes for each of those components that you would use, which basically means that all your action bars and buttons, etc., they will all be styled out of the box by default. So you don't have to set the class, for example, to your slider, class equals slider anymore, because what's the point? Because that can be done out of the box. We also provide a support for light and dark themes, which then on top of that can be combined with a specific skin. So you could use a light theme with Ruby or dark theme with Lime skin, etc., etc. The skins can also be changed at runtime, so you could actually make your app look differently for different users depending on what they choose, or maybe even depending on the settings of their own phones. There's one thing that you need to provide a little bit of JavaScript code, which enables some of the theme magic, and that might go away by the time we are done with the theme 2.0, but if you're curious about more of the details, go and check out this issue. So it's basically the issue number 7313, and we could have a discussion over there. And also the new theme replaces Node Sass with Dart Sass, because we just found that Dart Sass just works better for what we're trying to achieve. There's some features that we introduced. So we introduced several classes that are set at the root, and also there's a bunch of helper Sass functions and mixins, which in a simplest way saying enables you to set up your own branding of the application by providing like a primary colors or accent colors, or providing various attributes, and that's actually really nice and neat. The theme is also compatible with Kendo UI Theme Builder. So if you have used Kendo UI Theme Builder, it's really cool. You can actually now use it to also generate themes for NativeScript. It's really nice. And if you are one of the people that work on code sharing projects, this is great news, because those themes can be shared between both web and mobile projects, and that's really, really great. The new theme also provides styling for the new tabs and bottom navigation components, which is very useful and very needed. It also provides styling for NativeScript UI components like rad list view and rad data form, and then also provides styling for NativeScript picker and the NativeScript date time picker, which is really nice. So how to use it? Well, first you have to install NativeScript Theme Core at Next, because that's where we enabled the theme 2.0. Then in your app.js, you have to just this one line import NativeScript Theme Core, and that's enough for it to do its magic. And then depending whether you use Sass or CSS, you just have to import the theme core. And then possibly if you want to choose one of the skins here, and then it's very, very similar for CSS as well. And then the final step is just go and test the app. So for the demo, I am going to use the project that is available on GitHub. So you can just go to github.com/nativescript/theme, and make sure to use the add next branch, because that's the one that uses the theme 2.0. And I will just take you over to it now. Cool, so this is my project, and over here you can see my app.js. I'm importing NativeScript Theme Core. That's pretty much all I need to do in here. Then in my app Sass, I am just importing NativeScript Theme Core again. And like you can see in the demo app, there's a lot of different components, but I don't want to show you all of them. I just want to focus on few of them. So for example, the buttons, the code looks just like that. So it's pretty much similar to the current theme, but be prepared to be amazed, because we can now switch between like dark theme and then choose Lime or go for Ruby, and you can see how all of those change. I can also change to, for example, like a candle's skin, and you can see how all of the buttons are suddenly nice and rounded, and they just look more appealing. And I can still do the same thing using the light theme, which is nice and cool. Next one I want to show you is around pickers. So pickers are quite cool, and you can see I'm actually not applying any classes to those components. I'm just using them out of the box, and now I can choose an item picker, a date picker, etc., etc. And I can, for example, change it to a dark theme, and you can see that also the background of the things that pop up is nice and dark, depending on which one of them I am using. And then the forms one is also pretty cool. So that's where we're using our text fields and labels, etc., etc. And you can see like automatically as you select individual text fields, the background kind of lights up, so makes it a lot clearer of where you actually typing, which is quite nice. And again, I can very nicely change between different themes, and that kind of changes, and it looks great in both light and dark. And the final thing that I want to talk to you about is material design for NativeScript. This is a community project that was started by Martin from France, and he's actually using those components that I'll be showing you in real life applications in production, which is really, really amazing. And at the moment it's marked as beta because we still expect some breaking changes and maybe changing some of the naming or stuff. But in general, the components are in a nice and working order as they are. And by 6.1, we should have some more automated testing around those components to ensure that the quality always stays top notch. And we'll also be working on an improved documentation. So let me take you through this now. So the material design components is basically based on the design guidelines that were produced by Google, which they kind of tell you like what to do and not to do when you're building an application, but also they provided recommendation for styling of different UI components. What Martin did is actually created them like a very long list of components. So if you go to github.com/Achilles/NativeScript material components, you already see all of those components available in there. So this is the current list of what we have in there, but there is going to be more. And the cool thing is that even though all those components are placed in one GitHub repo, they're actually using Learn are split into a set of separate independent npm modules. So if you go to npm.js, you could search for NativeScript material and you will get a list of independent components. So you don't have to load all of the components in just when you want one. You choose which one you want. The next thing is that all of those components are compatible with NativeScript Core, NativeScript Vue, and NativeScript Angular, which basically is very inclusive and enables all of us native scripters to use material design components. And how would you go about using those components? Well, the first thing is you have to install them. So you have to install whichever components you want. So in this case, I'm giving you an example of NativeScript Material button. So run an npm install for NativeScript Material button at Android X, because this is the version that is compatible with NativeScript 6.0 release. And if you're building an Android application, you have to go to your app resources, Android source main res values. There's a file called styles.xml. And then for style name, launch screen theme base and app theme base, you have to update the name of the theme that you want to use. So it should be theme.material component. And then you could choose like the light version, no action bar. And this is basically what will be applied to the components as a default theme. And if you don't do that, actually your Android build will fail when you're using material design components. So this is a very, very important step. And in case you don't quite know how to do it, I'll give you a quick cheat sheet, and this is basically what I used. When in doubt, copy and paste. So go to again Martin's repo, to github.com/aquila/NativeScript material components, and then in there, as a few additional folders, there is a demo project. So if you go to demo/app/app resources, on and on and on, find the stars.xml file. And you can copy the settings from there to the equivalent stars.xml in your own project, and that should work. That should be enough, which is quite nice. So how to use it now, case by case. If you're working on a NativeScript core project, so in this case, you just use XML and S tag for MDB, and you say, hey, I want MDB to be NativeScript material button. And then for each of those, you could say MDB:button, and that's it. That's you're already using the first material design button. If you're building an Angular project, then you first have to import a specific module. So in your app module or any of the module that is relevant, you have to import NativeScript material button module from NativeScript material button /Angular. And then you provide that module in your imports. And then in your HTML, all you have to do is say, hey, I want to use MD button, set maybe repo color to blue, and you're good to go. For Vue, it's a very similar story. So again, you import the button plugin from NativeScript material button /Vue, then tell Vue to use the button plugin, and then you just use in your markup MD button, repo color blue, text tap me, and this will work like a charm. So if you want to see the code for different versions of all of the components, very handily, Martin actually provides 3 different demo projects. So in there's 3 folders. There is demo, demo ng, and demo view, where you can see how to use all of those material design components in 3 different flavors of NativeScript. But I am actually going to show you a demo from my own project. So here is my project, and you can see my package.json. I am importing all sort of material design components for NativeScript, and all of them use the Android X tag. Then in my style sheet, so that's the one that goes in the app resources. So the styles.xml, you can see I am using the theme material components. Then in my app module, I am importing all sort of different components, so like the button module, the card view, text field module, etc., etc., and all of them actually using the /Angular path, and then I'm just adding them, all of them, to my imports. So the first example I want to show you is the material design for buttons. So these buttons that you see here, they're actually standard NativeScript buttons. But you can see I have my MD button setting text to button. There's a disabled one, so you have like enabled and disabled versions for that. So this is how it looks on iOS, and you can see if I click on it, we have nice ripple effect also happening, and then on Android this looks very similar. So actually I went with like a blue color for the default one. But those buttons are pretty nice. Next, we have material design for text fields. So text fields, let me open the iOS one first. You just use MD text field with like variant field, or for example, we have another one which is outline. You can set properties like maximum length, etc., etc. So now I can fill this form, and you can see even like the numbers increment, and then as I click here, there's a pretty nice animation where the outline comes in and out. And then similarly for Android, we have a similar text field. So I can do A, B, C, D, E. I can type, and if I exceed, we also kind of the text field kind of goes red, and we have like the same type of animations happening. Next example is around card view. So this is like super simple to use. You just set MD card view, and then you put your content inside. You could set like specific ripple color effect, or just say, I don't want to have any ripple effect on this specific component. So we have, card view here, and we have Android card view as well. And you can see those ripple effects happening. It's pretty nice. I can click here, nothing's happening. And then there's like more. And more is basically a bunch of different components. So we have an activity indicator in different colors, different sizes. We have a progress bar. And then we have a bunch of sliders that are at the bottom. So I can kind of change, and they even animate as I tell it to slide. So we can have and more, and you can see they look similar on Android, which I think is pretty nice. And the best thing is that I can actually combine all of those components together. So if I use a bunch of card views with progress bars in different colors, I could start a parade. This is pretty cool. The kind of things that you can do with material design components is just amazing. So that's pretty much it from me for today. I hope that you use all of those things in the next project that you work on. And I'll pass the mic to TJ. Over to you, TJ. Bye.
All right, thanks, Sebastian. My name is TJ, and I'm super excited to talk to you about this NativeScript 6.0 release. And no offense to the previous presenters, but I do think that I have the coolest material to cover today because I get to look into NativeScript's future. Now, specifically, I have 4 different things that I'm going to be covering. The first 2 are features that you can actually already try out in NativeScript today. The first is NativeScript App Sync, and the second is our new WatchOS support. Next, we'll take a brief look at a pretty cool community project to add React support to NativeScript. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at a proof of concept that lets NativeScript apps run natively on macOS. Now, I have demos ready for all of these, so let's not waste any time. Let's dive right in and start with looking at NativeScript App Sync. All right, I'm over on my desktop and I have the NativeScript marketplace up. NativeScript App Sync is first and foremost a NativeScript plugin, and it's already available on the NativeScript marketplace. So you can head to market.nativescript.org and search for it if you'd like to follow along. AppSync is a live update service for your NativeScript apps, meaning AppSync allows you to update the source code of your apps on user devices, and to do so without having to go through the normal App Store or Google Play deployment processes. AppSync can update anything in your app folder or your node modules folder, but AppSync cannot perform NativeScript platform updates or update any plugins that have native dependencies, as those changes would require a native recompilation of your app. Now, being able to do this unlocks a lot of potential. And personally, I think it's a lot easier to understand exactly what this all means by actually seeing this plugin and this service in action. So what I'm going to do is switch over to a sample app that I've already got up and running. This is the NativeScript Acme sample. And as you can see, I've got this projects package.json up, and I already have the NativeScript App Sync plugin installed and ready to go. To use this, there is a little bit of additional setup that I need to do. In addition to being a NativeScript plugin, NativeScript App Sync has its own command line interface to help you manage application updates. You can get that by heading to your terminal or command prompt and installing it from npm. So it's nativescript-app-sync-CLI. Once you have that installed, you can register for the App Sync service using NativeScript App Sync register. Next, you'll need to add each app that you plan to enroll with App Sync using NativeScript App Sync add, the name of the app, so we'll call this Acme iOS, and the platform you want to enroll in, so either iOS or Android. AppSync also has a browser UI, which I can switch to over here. It's available at appsync.nativescript.org. And here you can see I already have this service set up for both iOS and Android. And if I click on them, I can get the deployment keys that I'm going to need to actually connect the app that I'm developing back here in Visual Studio Code to the AppSync server that's going to be able to manage my updates. To make that connection in code, I need to head to essentially whatever the startup file is of my app. So this is an Angular app, so this is going to be my main.ts file. If this were a NativeScript core app or a NativeScript Vue app, this would be the app.js or app.ts file. And what I'm going to do here is essentially drop in the simplest way of connecting to the AppSync service. And that is, I'm going to add an event handler to listen for the application resume event. And when that event occurs, I'll call the AppSync plugin. So this is coming from that NativeScript AppSync plugin that was in this apps package.json file. I'll call its sync method, and I'm just going to pass it the deployment keys that you saw from the browser earlier, and the appropriate one depending on platform, so iOS or Android. I'm going to explain what's happening here in a little more detail momentarily, because there are different ways that you can configure this. But for now, let's just see what this code actually does. So to start, I'm just going to head back to my terminal, and I am just going to run this application exactly as I normally would. And for our purposes today, we're just going to deploy this app out to a single simulator. So this one that's running over here, just because I want to make sure the simulator has this event handler that we just added. But you can essentially pretend that I'm distributing this app to my entire user base via both the Apple App Store and Google Play. And now that this app is out there and it's got this event handler in place, suppose I need to make an update to the app. Maybe I found a bug that I need to patch immediately. Or maybe I just have an embarrassing typo, which conveniently I do have right here in the name displaying for the app. So what I would need to do is first make that change. So in this case, this is going to be a simple markup change. First, I'm going to stop the runner. So I'll make the change here in the background without it actually getting deployed to this device. Now, this is a markup change that I'm making, but I could also work with TypeScript files, JavaScript files, or CSS files. Remember, any file in your app folder is something that AppSync can potentially deploy. Then I'm going to head back to my terminal. So I stopped the watcher, and I'm going to run a build for the platform I intend to deploy to. Now, the reason I'm running a build is what AppSync actually does is it's going to store the post-build versions of your source files. And the reason it does that is that you still want to have the ability to use tools like Webpack and Uglify. Your post-build files are what AppSync is actually going to store on its servers and use to manage the updates to your apps that need to happen. When the build finishes, I need to again use the NativeScript App Sync CLI, and this time I will use its release command, which needs both the application name and the platform I want to push an update to. And when I run this is going to upload my build files to the AppSync servers. Now, while this is finishing up, let's go ahead and just talk about how all of the pieces of this come back together. So if we have our app is sitting here. Remember, this is just on a simulator, but we can pretend this is a real user's device out in the real world. And at the moment, this app is running the old version of my code. You can see I don't have the string update yet. So what I need to do is pretend I'm using my device as normal as a user, and when I resume the app, I'm going to hit this event handler and hit this appsync.sync method. At this point, the plugin is going to check if there are any updates that it needs to download, which in this case it is. We just pushed one from the CLI, and then go ahead and silently download that update in the background. Now, AppSync can't immediately apply the update. After all, we are talking about a source code update that we're going to be making on the fly. However, as soon as the user restarts the app, or the OS does it as well, so let's just go ahead and kill that and restart it, the AppSync plugin is going to check if it has any stored updates, and if so, it just immediately and seamlessly applies them. You can see our string is now fixed. And as I mentioned earlier, I made a change to a markup file, but I could have just as easily applied a CSS update or a JavaScript update or a TypeScript update. And I was able to push out this update without needing to use the normal App Store deployment processes at all, which I think is really powerful. Now, there's a lot more to this plugin than I have time to cover today. For example, there are, if I head back to the README here, ways to configure this to separate staging deployments from production deployments. And you also have a lot of control over exactly how you want to deploy updates. So you can see there's all sorts of options that are spelled out here in pretty great detail in the documentation. So to learn more, I would recommend that you check out the plugins documentation in the NativeScript marketplace. The last thing I want to mention, and this is an important thing, is that even though this feature is available for you to try today, it's important to note that this is a plugin that in a service that is in a beta state. So if you do try it out, we'd love to know what you think, but use a little bit of care before you toss this immediately into your production workflows. And all right, so that's one of the two features that I'm going to talk about that you really can just jump in and try today. So with that, I'm going to move on to the second of our topics today, and that is our new support for building WatchOS apps. For this one, let's start with a little bit of background. On the NativeScript project, we've always tried to make it possible for you to build essentially the best native apps you possibly can, both for iOS and for Android. And for iOS specifically, one thing you've always been able to do is open your app up in Xcode at any time. For example, I've got the Acme sample app here, and if I go to, if I can manage to find it, my platforms folder, and let me just open this up in Finder, I can go ahead and open up my Xcode workspace. And from there, as it opens up, I can essentially do anything I could normally do in an Xcode app. Anything from just making small configuration changes, all the way to I could absolutely go to File, New Target, add a WatchKit app on, and write up an entire WatchOS app to package with my iOS app. Now, the problem with this historically is that the Xcode project lives in your platforms folder in your NativeScript app. And NativeScript developers, we treat this as generated code, meaning any changes that you make over here in Xcode can go away when you do a clean build of your NativeScript app. Now, this in general is not a new problem. In fact, this is why the app resources folder for NativeScript apps exists. It's a place where you can put native configuration files like an info plist, build xcconfig, as well as things like icons and splash screens. And in NativeScript 5.3, we started adding support for iOS App Extensions, which we have, find here, a documentation article for on the NativeScript docs. So it's under the tooling folder, and it is iOS App Extensions. And specifically, just to give you the short version of this, that means that you are able to, if I go back to these different extensions I can build, work with share extensions and today extensions for your NativeScript apps. So the today extension, if you're familiar with iOS at all, got a separate simulator over here, are these little widgets that appear on the leftmost screen on an iOS device. You can see I was testing with a NativeScript extension earlier. And then the share extension, if I just go into a random browser, is this list of apps that appear in the native share widgets. So with NativeScript, you can now add your app as to one of these sort of pre-built apps that are available in sharing across the OS. Now, if you want to learn more about these types of extensions specifically, again, I'd refer you back to this documentation article under Tooling and iOS Apps Extensions, which are going to walk you through the steps you need to take to make that possible. More recently, we added support for building WatchOS apps that work in a very similar fashion. You can see its documentation article is conveniently right under the one for iOS App Extensions. Now, essentially what you need to do is open up your NativeScript app and head into this File, New Target window and just add on a WatchKit app. And the article, the documentation, is going to walk you through exactly what you need to do as part of these screens. From there, you just need to build a WatchOS app exactly as you would for any other WatchOS app that you were building on iOS. And in fact, I've already got a really simple WatchOS app, if I can find it in here, started for the Acme sample. Once you have your WatchOS app started, it's going to live in your platforms folder alongside where your existing Xcode project does today. And what you'll need to do is follow along with the documentation, and it's going to have you move it into the app resources folder. So there's a specific convention for exactly how NativeScript wants you to structure this. It's going to include a watch app folder. Then your actual app itself goes here. And then you need a small bit of configuration just so the CLI knows how to package up your watch app and place it into your platform's folder so all of your changes get retained. So I do have these files moved appropriately, but I do want to show you how this works. And to do that, I'm going to head back to my terminal and I'm going to say goodbye to my platform's folder and then build things back up by performing a completely new build. The NativeScript CLI is going to recognize that a WatchOS app is living here in app resources. It's going to find the appropriate configuration files, and it's going to package this WatchOS app into the iOS app that it's building. Even better, now that the app is moved, when you need to make changes to that WatchOS app as you continue developing it, those changes are going to continue to live in your app resources folder. Meaning you don't have to constantly copy and paste files back from platforms back into app resources. Now, while this is building, because I'm doing a completely new build from scratch, I will mention that this is another feature that is also still in beta. So this is something you can absolutely try out today. And if you do try it out, make sure to let us know what you think. And there's a link here at the bottom of the documentation article to the tracking issue for this feature. All right, so let's see if our build is done. It looks like it is. So I'm going to open this back up in Xcode. Open it here. And then I will select to deploy this out to a simulator that's also got an Apple Watch component. And I'll drag this over as it's installing it. And there we go. So overall, NativeScript now provides you a way to build these WatchOS apps in a way that lives right alongside the rest of your NativeScript project so that you can continue developing on it as you develop your NativeScript app. One last thing I'll note, just because I know this comes up a lot, for Android, one of our developer experts, Brad Martin, has a plugin for building WhereOS extensions for your NativeScript Android apps. And if I open up the README here, you can see that you can actually develop these applications using some sort of normal NativeScript markup and features. So if you're interested in WhereOS, make sure to check this out. And for us on the NativeScript team, we are planning on researching adding official WhereOS support to NativeScript. And this is yet another thing that we are looking for your feedback on. So if you are working on an app that needs wearables, check out our new WatchOS support, check out Brad's WhereOS plugin. Let us know what you think of each of these features if you'd like to see us work on these some more, whether that's in chat, in surveys, or whatnot. And all right, so that's an update on wearables in NativeScript. So let's go ahead and move on to the third of our 4 topics today, and that's React NativeScript. To start, React NativeScript is a community project to, as simply put, allow you to write NativeScript apps using React, similarly to the way you can use Angular or Vue.js with NativeScript today. The effort is led by Jamie Birch from the NativeScript community, and you can find the current state of the project on GitHub at this URL. There are a couple things I want to point out before we look at a bit of code. First, unlike NativeScript App Sync and our WatchOS support we just looked at, React NativeScript is a community project that's in a very early state. This isn't something you'd want to use or work on in a production app today. Second, you might wonder why you would even want to use this instead of using something like React Native or NativeScript with some other framework. And Jamie's README has a pretty good comparison if you scroll down here to the bottom to help answer that question. Now, there are a number of different reasons, and some of it is just personal preference, but the really big difference is in how each framework allows you to work with native APIs. In React Native, you must use an asynchronous bridge to access these APIs, which can be a little bit clunky and doesn't exactly have the best development workflow. Whereas in NativeScript, you can easily and synchronously access native APIs, and do so while taking advantage of NativeScript's fast development workflow. Now, like I mentioned, this project is in a very early state, but Jamie does have a playground example that can give you an idea of exactly what's possible. The example is a simple list of NativeScript components rendered using React. And if you're familiar with React, you might recognize some familiar syntax in here. And when I preview, so I'll bring this up on my device and then drag this over so you can see what I see, you can get a sense of just what this integration already supports. There's really a surprising amount of stuff that's already working and already there. Obviously, this is still early days for this plugin and for this integration, but hopefully this gives you a sense of just what is possible. So this is another feature we'd love to have your feedback on. And personally, if you'd like to get involved with the community that's developing this plugin, if you head to the README, you'll see that there, somewhere in here, you can join the NativeScript community Slack channel. So there's links in the README. And specifically, you'll want to check out the React channel, which is where Jamie and some of the rest of us hang out to talk about this integration. And all right, so that's an early look at React in NativeScript and some of what might be possible. And so with that, I want to segue to the final of our topics today, and that's running NativeScript apps natively on macOS. All right, at this year's WWDC, Apple announced the ability for iOS apps to run on macOS using something called Project Catalyst. Now, as you might imagine, this caught our attention on the NativeScript team as we help developers build iOS apps. So it seems like a natural thing for us to experiment with. And sure enough, if you take a NativeScript app and you open it up in the latest version of Xcode, so I've got my Xcode workspace here, and I'm going to open it with the Xcode beta. And if I do so, you'll see when it loads here that I have this brand new checkbox that's going to allow me to deploy a NativeScript app to a Mac. Now, before you get too excited, if you do try to run this today, which is something I did immediately, you will get errors, as the NativeScript of today doesn't directly support this approach. After all, it is basically a month or so old and still in pretty early beta. There is some work that we have to do. But our team did want to experiment to see what was possible. And I'm happy to say that with some updates to our iOS runtime, we were able to build a pretty simple macOS app using NativeScript, which I'm opening right now. This is essentially a little Reddit viewer, and it's not the world's single most amazing application. But if you think of what's happening here, it's actually kind of cool. This is a native macOS app. So this isn't Electron or anything web-based. It's using completely native macOS components. And it's built with the same NativeScript syntax you use to build iOS and Android apps today. There are even some fun little things like my mouse scroll wheel works out of the box on this. So you get some desktop behavior out of the box. Now, as you might imagine, this is a proof of concept. So this isn't something that you're going to be able to use to build production apps in the semi-near future. However, this is something that's totally possible. Therefore, this is yet another thing that we would really like your feedback on to help us prioritize. Do you have personal projects you'd like to build for macOS? Does your company or organization have the need to build native macOS apps? If so, feel free to reach out. We'd love to chat about your requirements and what we can do. As you can see, the future of NativeScript is looking bright. Today, you can try out both NativeScript App Syncs for making quick app updates and our new WatchOS support. You can also experiment or get involved with React support for NativeScript, and let us know if you'd like to use NativeScript to build macOS apps. Hopefully you've enjoyed this fun glimpse into NativeScript's future, and with that, I'm going to toss things back over to Rob, who's going to wrap things up for today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, TJ, and thank you, Mira. Remember, there is still a little bit of time to get your questions in on Twitter with that Ask NativeScript hashtag. Now, today we covered a lot, and if I can possibly summarize it all, it went something like this. The Webpack and HMR build workflow is now the only way to develop with NativeScript. This will lead to some better productivity and definitely improved app performance for you. Android X support is here, and along with it is upcoming support for material design components. Speaking of design, the NativeScript core theme has been revamped for this release. And you saw our look at code push as NativeScript App Sync builds on the foundation of Microsoft's offering to provide app updates with the click of a button. And our community is hard at work to bring React support to NativeScript. And you'll be seeing full support for wearables like Apple Watch and WhereOS, along with the really cool possibility of creating NativeScript desktop apps for macOS. So plenty of cool stuff in this release. And as we wind down, I always like to reference the NativeScript book. It's a completely free resource for you at nativescript.org/book. So if you're a book learner, you can download this for free today. Likewise, if you're a video learner, definitely check out our friends at nativescripting.com. There's all kinds of NativeScript training content here, much of it for free even. And before we end today, I wanted to mention a conference that I think you would all enjoy. Progress is hosting JS MobileConf in Boston this fall, and we would love it if you could join us. JS MobileConf is a 2-day, 2-track conference focused on NativeScript, mobility, and the extended JavaScript ecosystem. Early bird tickets are available now through the end of July, and we have some great keynote speakers lined up in Max Furtman and David Neal, along with, of course, plenty of other wonderful speakers. Check us out at jsmobileconf.com today. We will all be there as well, so you'll see content on NativeScript, of course, but also progressive web apps, augmented and virtual reality, serverless, machine learning, and much more. And with that, from all of us to all of you, thank you all so much for attending and have a fantastic rest of your day.